Her granddaughter called her our guilt bill within earshot, and without shame. Evelyn dried her hands, walked back into the dining room, and smiled like nothing broke. By morning, the scholarship fund she'd once built in Kayla's name would vanish, restructured, anonymous, irrevocable. She'd spent years being their safety net, their fallback, their quiet obligation. Now she would fund futures without asking for applause or permission, and when they looked for her name, they'd find a legacy too large to label. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. They didn't know she could hear them. From the kitchen archway, Evelyn froze mid-step, her hands still damp from rinsing the wine glasses. The laughter, light and casual, had stopped just seconds ago. Then Kayla's voice cut through like a shard of ice. "She's just our guilt bill." It wasn't even whispered. That was the part Evelyn would remember later, the ease of it. No venom, no hesitation, like it was an accepted fact. Danielle dropped her fork. The sound, small and metallic, was deafening. No one said a word. Not to correct Kayla, not to apologize, not even to shift uncomfortably. Evelyn blinked, just once. Then she dried her hands on the edge of her apron, walked into the dining room with the same grace she'd worn for decades, and smiled. It was small and tight and perfect. The kind of smile people thanked her for giving even as she handed them their shame on a platter. "I'll be right back," she said softly, brushing her hand across the back of her chair. She turned before anyone could respond. Her footsteps were light, nearly soundless, as she crossed the hall to her study. She didn't close the door hard. She didn't need to. Silence had always been her weapon of choice. Inside the room, she stood still in the dim light. The walls, lined with books and old photographs, seemed to close in around her. But Evelyn wasn't shrinking. Not tonight. She crossed to the built-in drawer beneath the bookshelf and pulled out a small brass key from the porcelain bowl on the desk. The lock clicked smooth and familiar. The drawer slid open to reveal a slim folder, wrapped in a protective plastic sleeve. She pulled it free. A label across the front read, "KG Trust, Confidential." She sat down, the leather chair creaking slightly beneath her, and laid the folder on the desk like a ritual. Hands steady, chin lifted. Inside were documents she hadn't touched in years. Legal contracts, donation agreements, correspondence from 2 Ivy League financial officers. Her name, Evelyn G. Kessler appeared on the foundation charter in bold. She traced the letters with her finger, remembering the nights she'd stayed up after the girls were asleep, drafting proposals and calculating distributions. She'd built this trust to fund the education of women with stories like her smart, invisible, too often cast as burdens. She had meant it for Kayla, for Danielle, until they made her feel like the ledger they owed. The cursor blinked on the laptop. She'd already typed in the password. The digital portal was open. Pledge terms confirmed. Allocation plan solid. She scrolled to the final line. Submit annual pledge. Her hand hovered above the mouse. Then her phone lit up. A message. From Danielle. Just one line. "I didn't know she'd say that. Please don't do anything drastic." For a moment, Evelyn didn't breathe. She stared at the screen, at the words that were somehow too much and not enough. The silence of the house pressed in again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, with memory, with decisions, with truths that had sat buried far too long. She looked back at the screen. The submit button waited. One click, one breath, one choice. Her finger hovered. And then, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. "Mom?" It was Danielle, muffled, hesitant. Evelyn didn't answer. She stared at the door, then back at the screen. Still, her finger didn't move. Not yet. They mistook her stillness for absence. Danielle stood in the doorway, her voice small and uncertain. "Mom?" Evelyn didn't answer at first. Her eyes were still on the screen. The cursor blinked like a pulse. Danielle stepped in slowly, barefoot on the hardwood, arms crossed over her chest. I didn't know she'd say that, she said, voice thin. It wasn't fair. Evelyn finally turned. Her face was unreadable calm, almost gentle, but something in her posture had changed. Steel where there used to be silk. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk. Sit. Danielle obeyed without question, as if realizing too late that her mother had never been passive, only patient. Evelyn tapped a key and turned the screen toward her. This, she said, is what I started years ago, before either of you were old enough to understand that nothing comes free. Danielle leaned forward. She squinted at the header, KG Trust Educational Grant. She recognized some of the names. Private universities, endowment contacts, a draft agreement titled Anonymous Allocation Protocol. You're donating? Evelyn nodded. I'm finalizing a transfer tonight. Danielle blinked. To who? Silence. Then Evelyn clicked a drop-down menu and selected a recipient from the profile list. Danielle inhaled sharply when she saw it. Kayla? Evelyn didn't flinch. Yes. You're giving it to Kayla? After what she said? I'm not giving it to her. I'm giving it through her, Evelyn said coolly. She doesn't need to know. No ceremony. No credit. No acknowledgement. Just results. Danielle's brow furrowed. Then why do it? Evelyn looked at her daughter, her voice even. Because I don't need to be thanked to do what's right. But I'm also not going to keep chasing gratitude that was never mine to begin with. Danielle folded her arms tighter. Why not at least let her know? It's your name, your legacy. Evelyn's eyes narrowed not in anger, but in clarity. Because they already wrote me off, she said. Now I get to decide what I leave behind. She selected the anonymous donor checkbox. With one swift motion, she removed her name from every signature field. The file reloaded with new headers. No Evelyn, no Kessler, no trace. Danielle watched in silence. Evelyn clicked through pages, confirming allocations, timelines, and terms of renewal. The numbers were clean, the structure solid. It would fund Kayla's research whether Kayla knew it or not. And maybe, someday, the ripple would reach a girl who needed it. A girl who'd never be told she was too expensive to love. She opened her email client and drafted a message to the financial officer at Breyer University. Subject: Final transfer approval. KG Trust. Confirm anonymous disbursement. No attribution. Schedule immediately. Her hand paused over the keyboard one final time. Danielle, still sitting across from her, whispered, Mom, are you sure? Evelyn didn't look up. I'm done waiting to be seen, she said. And with that, she hit send. The screen refreshed. A reply landed less than a minute later. Subject: Transfer scheduled, irreversible. Body: Confirmation received. The disbursement process is now irreversible. Completion by end of day. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. For the first time in years, her spine didn't feel tired. It felt like a pillar. No speeches, no audience, just quiet power. The campus admin building smelled faintly of old paper and floor wax. Evelyn stood beneath its flickering fluorescence like she belonged there not as a guest, not as a mother, but as a force. The financial advisor, a young man barely older than Kayla, shuffled through the papers Evelyn had brought. His fingers trembled slightly with each page turn. This is a significant contribution, he murmured, eyes widening as he scanned the figures. Are you certain you want to remain anonymous? Evelyn's expression didn't shift. I'm not here for certainty. I'm here for execution. He nodded, flustered, and slid the final page toward her. Then I just need your signature on this last clause. She didn't ask for clarification, didn't reread the text. She picked up the pen, signed with smooth, deliberate pressure, and pushed the page back across the desk. Danielle stood just behind her, hands clasped in front of her, her presence quiet but firm. The roles had shifted. Evelyn was no longer the support beam. She was the architect. The advisor cleared his throat. Would you like a press release coordinated? We have templates for major donors. There's also an option for a commemorative plaque or... No, Evelyn said simply. He blinked. No press. No plaque. No ceremony. The funding is what matters. Let the work speak. He nodded again, more carefully this time, as if sensing that beneath her civility lay the power to unravel his entire week with one sentence. She stood, adjusted the buttons on her coat, and turned to Danielle. We're done here. They walked out together, heels clicking in rhythm, coats brushing shoulders. No one stopped them. No one asked questions. Just two women leaving a quiet building after shifting an entire institution. Outside, the sky was pale and overcast. Evelyn paused at the steps and looked out over the quad. Students moved like currents, laughing, rushing, unaware of the legacy quietly being laid beneath their feet. Danielle glanced at her. You didn't even hesitate. Evelyn didn't respond right away. She took a slow breath, as if drawing strength from the silence around them. Sometimes you don't wait for recognition, she said finally. You just lay the wire and let the lights come on. Danielle nodded, emotion flickering behind her eyes. They made their way to the car in silence, the air cold enough to sting. Evelyn slid into the passenger seat while Danielle rounded the driver's side. The envelope of signed papers rested on the dashboard like a sealed fate. Neither of them saw the student standing by the fountain, watching them with a curious expression. Neither noticed the professor who passed by, eyes flicking to Evelyn's face with a hint of recognition. It was already starting. Danielle's phone buzzed as she pulled onto the main road. She ignored it at first. Another buzz. Then another. Evelyn glanced at her. Someone trying to reach you? Danielle frowned. Probably a group chat. I'll check once we're on the highway. They rode in companionable silence for several miles, the trees on either side of the road blurring into early winter gray. Then, at the stoplight, Danielle finally reached for her phone. Her eyebrows knit as she read the screen. She turned the phone toward Evelyn. A text from Kayla. Why is your name trending? She gave in silence. The world responded with noise. The headline wasn't on a major news site. Just a local outlet. A campus-affiliated blog that rarely got more than a few dozen views. But this morning, it had gone viral. Anonymous no more. Mystery benefactor behind $1.8 million scholarship revealed as retired local widow. Evelyn stared at the screen, jaw tight, lips motionless. Her tea sat untouched beside her, steam curling upward into the quiet of her kitchen. The photo they used was 10 years old, taken at a community awards luncheon she hadn't even remembered attending. She wore a pale blue jacket and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Danielle entered from the hallway, her phone in hand. Mom, she said, voice cautious. It's everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, even some regional sites picked it up. Someone from the university must have leaked the documents. Evelyn closed the laptop with care, like she was laying a body to rest. So much for anonymity. Before Danielle could respond, Evelyn's phone buzzed again. Kayla. Another text. Why didn't you tell me? Are you seriously trying to humiliate me? Danielle read over her shoulder. Wow, still making it about herself. Evelyn didn't respond to the message. She slid the phone away, the gesture surgical. They want control, she murmured. Even now. It's not about what I did. It's about how I didn't do it their way. A soft ding echoed from her laptop. A new email from Breyer University's Office of Advancement. She opened it. Subject: Official Statement and Invitation. We sincerely regret the premature disclosure of your identity. Please know that the university is conducting a formal investigation into the breach. In the meantime, we would be honored to recognize your generosity at the unveiling of our new donor wall this Saturday. Attached was a PDF mock-up of the wall marble, etched with names, centered by a bronze plaque. Evelyn G., Kessler Legacy Donor, 2025. She stared at it for a long moment, expression unreadable. Danielle leaned over. You should go. Evelyn arched an eyebrow. You earned it, Danielle said. Stop letting them define the size of your story. Evelyn gave a soft laughtery, a little broken around the edges. My story's not their sculpture, Danielle. It's what comes after, what no one prints. Danielle reached across the table and placed a hand on her mother's. Then go stand next to it, quietly, like you do, but don't pretend it doesn't matter. The cursor hovered over the RSVP link. One click. Evelyn hesitated. She wasn't afraid. Not of Kayla's temper, not of whispers or the hungry way press loved a reclusive woman with money. What made her hand pause was something deeper mourning for the parts of her life that had only ever existed in shadows. The private intentions, the quiet strength, the invisible fingerprints on other people's futures. To be seen now was to let it all be rewritten by someone else's narrative. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and clicked. RSVP confirmed. Saturday, noon. Donor wall ceremony. Guest list, faculty, press, and Kayla. She built that campus. Now she walked uninvited, unnoticed. The gravel path crunched beneath Evelyn's low heels as she and Danielle crossed the quad. Cold air teased the edges of her coat, but she didn't shiver. Her gaze was fixed ahead on the brick building at the edge of the lawn, where the donor wall stood waiting. Around them, students passed in clusters laughing, glued to their phones, juggling coffee cups and backpacks. Not one gave her a second glance. No one pointed. No whispers followed her. Evelyn moved through it all like a ghost. Danielle kept pace beside her. Quiet, protective. She hadn't worn makeup, said she didn't want this to feel like a performance. Evelyn appreciated that. They reached the steps of the Fine Arts Pavilion. A string quartet hummed softly inside, part of the reception, but Evelyn didn't pause for it. Her interest was outside, mounted into the stone just past the archway. The donor wall. Marble, cool and pristine. Rows of names carved into permanence. Familiar names. Corporate sponsors. Foundations. And in the center, surrounded by sunlight glinting off the polished surface. Evelyn G. Kessler Legacy Donor. 2025. Danielle exhaled quietly beside her. But Evelyn said nothing. She simply looked. The bronze gleamed, dignified and unembellished. Her name didn't shout. It didn't ask for applause. It just wassailed, unyielding, permanent. A voice, high and careless, floated across the lawn. Laughter. Evelyn turned slightly. 20 yards away, Kayla stood beneath a tree with two classmates. She wore a tailored navy coat and sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. She was laughing, breezy and loud, a practiced kind of casual that Evelyn recognized too well. She'd worn it herself once. Kayla gestured toward something, mid-story. The others chuckled obligingly. One of them held a printed program. Kayla plucked it from their hand and flipped through it with mock drama. Danielle shifted, instinctively stepping half in front of her mother. But Evelyn didn't move. She turned back to the wall, looked once more at the plaque. No pride, no regret, just the clarity of seeing something through to its end. Then Kayla's voice changed. Wait. A pause. Silence wrapped the moment like a drawstring. From behind her, Evelyn heard the footsteps approach. Slow, hesitant. Then, a voice, disbelieving. That's your name? She didn't want an apology. She wanted acknowledgement. The space between them held decades. Unspoken things. Misunderstood ones. But Kayla crossed it anyway. She stepped forward slowly, her friends fading behind her like props retreating from the stage. Her boots clicked against the stone as she moved toward Evelyn. Eyes locked on the bronze plaque as if seeing it not just for the first time, but for the first time truthfully. Evelyn didn't turn. Not until Kayla stood beside her and whispered, "That's your name?" Only then did Evelyn meet her daughter's eyes. Kayla's face was pale beneath her perfect makeup. Her voice, stripped of its bravado, held something Evelyn hadn't heard in years. Uncertainty. "I don't understand," Kayla said. "Why would you do this and not tell me?" Evelyn looked back at the plaque, then at Kayla, her voice calm. "Because you weren't listening." It wasn't said cruelly, just fact, like the weather, like breath. Danielle came to stand just behind her mother, eyes scanning the scene, gauging the tension. But she didn't interrupt. She knew this moment wasn't hers. Kayla blinked fast, as if fighting a sting behind her eyes. Her posture so often sharp and angular slumped, just slightly. "I was angry. she said. When I saw the headline, I thought you were, I don't know, making a statement, spiting me. Evelyn offered a soft, almost imperceptible smile. It was never about you. Kayla's head jerked up at that, but then the truth of it settled over her like a blanket pulled tight. It hadn't been about her. Not the funding, not the anonymity, not the legacy. It had been about purpose. Kayla's friends, now hovering near the fountain, sensed the shift. One touched the other's arm. They murmured something and slowly backed away, giving the three women space that had never existed before. I read the grant report last night, Kayla said softly. The endowment. It's going to help dozens of women. It already has. Her voice faltered. And two said such awful things. At the house. At dinner. Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't offer forgiveness because that wasn't what this moment was asking for. Instead, she looked at her granddaughter, really looked, and said, "Now you see the work." Kayla's breath caught in her throat. It was Danielle who bridged the silence. She stepped closer and laid a hand lightly on Kayla's shoulder, not pushing her, just grounding her. The weight of memory, pride, regrettal of it seemed to collapse into Kayla's next breath. Her chin trembled. Her voice cracked. "Thank you," she said. I didn't get it. But I do now." And then, without ceremony or pretense, Kayla stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Evelyn. It wasn't the kind of hug staged for photo ops or reconciliations made pretty for Instagram. It was tight, wordless, a grasp that held both apology and awe. Evelyn, still for a moment, allowed it. Then she lifted one hand slowly and placed it gently on Kayla's back. Click. The sound was faint, distant. A photographer from the university's press team, moving unnoticed through the edge of the crowd, had raised his lens just in time. No flash, just a shutter, a single frame. Three women, framed by legacy and loss, standing at the foot of something carved in stone. Hours later, the photo circulates online, captioned, "Donor and granddaughter, reunited at Briar Legacy Ceremony." Trending. Everywhere. Her silence became a speech shared by thousands. The photo was everywhere. By noon, Evelyn's landline had rung twice, once from a local reporter, once from a regional morning show. By 4, Danielle's inbox was full of producers asking for quotes, sound bites, sit-downs. Evelyn stood at her kitchen counter, scrolling through an article, on her tablet. There she was, caught mid-embrace with Kayla. A headline floated above it. "The woman who gave without wanting credit." She read the line again. It made her stomach twist. Danielle entered, holding her phone. NBC just called again. And the Briar Gazette. They want a statement, at least. Evelyn didn't answer. Danielle set her phone down and softened. "You don't have to explain anything. But you also don't have to hide." Evelyn glanced up. "I didn't do this to be known." "No," Danielle said gently. "But now you are. And people are listening. Maybe it's time you say what you want." "Say what you want." The phrase echoed in Evelyn's chest like a dare. 2 days later, she walked into a brightly lit studio in a borrowed blazer and her best pearls. The hosta, warm-eyed woman in her 40s greeted her with professional excitement and a grip that lingered just a second too long. "You're quite the story, Evelyn," she said. "Let's help people hear it." The cameras rolled. The lights softened. And Evelyn began. Her voice was steady. She didn't script it. Didn't rehearse. She spoke the way she always had, clear, measured, from the center of something earned. She talked about her scholarship fund. About women who go unseen. About raising daughters while disappearing into the margins. "There's no award for being steady," she said. "But sometimes, that's the reason the house doesn't fall." The host nodded, visibly moved. The segment was supposed to run 5 minutes. They were 12 minutes in when the stage assistant waved behind the camera. The host paused. "We've just gotten word, Evelyn. I hope you don't mind. There's someone who asked to join us. She says she's family." Before Evelyn could ask, the curtain lifted and Kayla walked in. Evelyn's spine tensed, but Kayla didn't stride. She didn't perform. She walked slowly, arms at her sides, eyes steady. She reached for the mic. "She's my Nana," she said. "And I didn't get it. Not until I saw what the world saw. And I still don't deserve to be here. But I wanted to say thank you, publicly, because she didn't ask for a stage, but she built one." Evelyn's hand trembled slightly. She reached out. Kayla took it. They didn't say anything else. The host smiled softly. The camera panned wide, capturing a moment, not choreographed, not clean, just real. After the show, in the green room, Evelyn sank into the couch. Danielle met them there, coffee in hand, eyes glassy with pride. "People needed that," she whispered. Evelyn let the warmth settle around her like a shawl. She'd gone her whole life keeping things together. Today, she'd let herself be seen. And it hadn't broken her. It had opened her. Her phone buzzed gently. She glanced down. Email subject: Keynote invitation. National Donor Gala, Washington, D.C. Message preview: "We'd be honored to have you speak as our closing voice." She wasn't there to inspire. She was there to reclaim. The invitation sat open on the dining table, untouched for days. A cream-colored envelope, the kind that looked expensive even before you opened it. Inside, embossed lettering and gold trim: "Keynote speaker, National Donor Gala, Washington, D.C." Evelyn stood by the window, arms crossed, watching snow flirt with the edge of the porch. She hadn't said yes. She hadn't said no. She just waited. Danielle came in from the cold, cheeks pink, coat half unbuttoned. She took one look at the envelope and sighed. "You still haven't responded?" "I don't want to be someone's mascot," Evelyn said quietly. "Not now." Danielle moved beside her, voice soft but firm. "It's not about their stage, Mom. It's about your voice. The one they can't edit, can't cut short, can't take credit for." Silence. Then, "If you don't want to do it, that's okay. But if you're afraid of being misused, then say it yourself before they say it for you." That night, Evelyn typed a reply. Short, gracious, accepting. The next morning, Kayla came by unannounced. She didn't say much, just handed Evelyn a small box wrapped in paper printed with soft red florals. "For the speech," she said, then added quieter, "I think it suits you better than pearls." Inside, a scarlet scarf, silk, lightweight, elegant. Evelyn smiled, folding the fabric between her fingers. "Thank you," she said. She wore it the night of the gala. The ballroom was grand high ceilings, chandeliers like snowdrifts of light. She walked backstage calmly, as if she'd done this 100 times. She hadn't. But her steps didn't shake. The host introduced her with enthusiasm, listing her credentials, her donation, her unexpected viral fame. Evelyn barely heard it. She stepped to the podium and looked out at rows of faces. Donors, leaders, policymakers, students, she began. "I was asked to inspire you tonight. I won't do that." Laughter nervous, polite. "I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to reclaim." She paused. "For years, women like me were told we were invisible, that our work was background, our choice quiet. But we were never invisible. We were ignored. Now, silence heavy, reverent. I didn't build a fund to be celebrated. I built it because I know what it feels like to be underestimated. And I want fewer girls to carry that weight." Her voice was calm, her rhythm deliberate. Every word landed like it had been waiting decades for air. When she finished, the room rose. A standing ovasano music prompting it. No applause sign flashing. Just a wave of people on their feet, clapping, many with damp eyes. Afterward, a woman approached her mid-50s, direct, energetic. "I'm Sandra Hall," she said, "Director of the Equity Future Foundation. You have a voice these girls need. We'd like to bring you on as a mentor, if you're willing." Evelyn's reply was quiet. "I am." Later that week, back home, her inbox pinged. One new message. Subject: New mentee assignment. Jasmine L. Rivera. Body: first-year recipient. Strong potential. Needs stable mentorship. Evelyn clicked the file open and paused, because the attached photo showed a girl with wide-set eyes and a defiant set to her jaw, just like Evelyn's own, 60 years ago. She thought she had nothing left to teach. Evelyn chose the quietest booth in the cafe near the window, far from the espresso machine's hiss and the laughter of students curled over laptops. She set her tea on a napkin and glanced at her watch. 4 minutes early. Always had been. The door chimed. A girl stepped in, wide-set eyes. Denim jacket too thin for November. Backpack worn at the seams. Jasmine L. Rivera. Evelyn knew it was her before she waved. Jasmine approached with the tentative confidence of someone used to apologies and proving herself in the same breath. "Miss Kessler?" she asked. "Evelyn," she corrected gently. "Sit." They exchanged small talk where Jasmine was from. Camden. What she was studying. Urban planning. What she wanted to do. Build cities that don't forget their people. Evelyn listened. Then Jasmine said it like she hadn't meant to, like it just fell out between sips of bitter coffee. "My mom thinks I'm too ambitious." Evelyn looked up, expression calm. "And what do you think?" Jasmine hesitated. "I think I scare her. She worked so hard just to survive college, feels like showing off." Evelyn stirred her tea. "That's her fear, not your burden." Jasmine blinked. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Then finally, yeah, that's what it feels like." They spoke for an hour. Jasmine talked about working 2 jobs, about hiding her grandade so no one would call her lucky, about professors who praised her but never said her name correctly, about being smart enough to be in the room, but not rich enough to feel like she belonged there. Evelyn didn't offer fixes. She didn't turn this into a seminar. She just asked questions, nodded, listened, and when Jasmine paused, she filled the space with grace. "There's dignity in money," Evelyn said softly. "Not because it makes you better, but because it lets you stop asking for permission." Jasmine's eyes sharpened. That landed. "You get it," she said. "You really get it." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "I do." When they stood to leave, Evelyn extended her hand, but Jasmine hugged her instead. Not long, not emotional, just enough. Enough to say this mattered. Outside, the wind had turned sharp. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter. Jasmine adjusted her backpack and grinned. "Same time next week?" Evelyn nodded. "Same time." That night, Evelyn typed an email. Short, like all the best things she'd written. Subject, just a line to keep close. Body, you are the seed. Let no one shame your soil. She hit send. A reply came just after midnight. Jasmine Rivera. "Can I quote you in my essay?" What started with one name bloomed into dozens. The essay was titled, "What Seeds Remember." It opened with a quote. "You are the seed. Let no one shame your soil. Evelyn G. Kessler." Jasmine submitted it to her sociology professor, not expecting anything more than a grade and maybe a comment scribbled in red. Within a week, it was reposted on the university's social media account, then the campus newsletter, then an online journal for first-gen college students. By week's end, Evelyn's inbox had 17 new emails from students. Some were short. "Can I meet you for coffee?" "I read Jasmine's essay. I need someone like you. I didn't know women like you existed." Others poured their hearts out about hunger, about loneliness, about building futures no one else could picture for them. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, reading them slowly, one by one. Her tea went cold beside her. The sky shifted from morning to early dusk. Danielle entered with a soft knock. "We're gonna need a spreadsheet," she said, setting down her laptop with a smile. 17 mentorship requests and counting. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask for a wait list." "You didn't have to," Danielle said. "You are the list." They laughed genuinely this time. Kayla showed up that evening with takeout and a plan. "I coded a basic scheduling app," she said, unrolling a laptop charger like it was a stethoscope. "Something simple. Tracks conversations, sets reminders, lets you log who needs what." Evelyn stared at her, amused. "You did this for me?" Kayla smiled, a little sheepish. Number, I did it for them. You just make it possible. They worked late into the night, building a digital ecosystem around Evelyn's words. 3 days later, a formal proposal arrived from the university. A garden, a circular plot near the arts building, to be named in her honor. The Kessler Legacy garden designed as a reflective space, with plaques bearing words from students she'd mentored. Evelyn read the letter twice, then folded it. She said nothing for a while. Danielle watched her. You okay? I didn't do any of this for marble or landscaping, Evelyn said. No, Kayla added, but a garden grows. That night, Jasmine stopped by with a printed copy of her essay and a small potted plant. Nothing grand, just basil, but it smelled like something beginning. I heard about the garden, she said, nervous. They said you might lead the groundbreaking? Evelyn hesitated. It feels like an ending. Jasmine tilted her head. Maybe. Or maybe it's where you plant what comes next. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped to the window and looked outside. The yard was still dusted with snow, but underneath, the soil was softening. She turned back, eyes meeting Jasmine's. I'm not done growing yet. Jasmine grinned. Then grow with us. 1 week later, a formal email lands in Evelyn's inbox. Subject: Kessler Garden Groundbreaking Ceremony. Leadership Confirmation. Body: You are confirmed to lead the opening remarks. They didn't plant flowers. They planted proof. The earth was still cold, but not frozen. It gave under the shovels with a soft resistance like it had been waiting. Evelyn pressed the toe of her boot into the spade's edge and leaned in. The soil cracked open with a deep, earthen sigh. Around her, a small circle of people worked in quiet rhythm. Jasmine beside her, sleeves pushed to her elbows, face flushed with effort. Kayla, kneeling with gloved hands, loosening soil at the base of a sapling. Danielle, directing placement with a clipboard and an occasional wink. They weren't gardeners. They were builders. Signs were planted along the garden's winding path, small, wooden, handwritten in looping cursive and tight block letters. For those who gave without being asked. To the ones who walked quietly so we could run. Legacy isn't what you leave, it's what you grow. Some were taped to stakes. Others tied to the saplings themselves, fluttering like flags of a new nation. Evelyn stood from her hole and pressed a palm to her lower back. I was promised symbolism, not sciatica. Jasmine laughed and handed her a bottle of water. They took a break beneath the sculpture of a raised hand, the only permanent installation so far. More benches, plaques, and pathways would come. But today was for digging. Later, students began arriving in clustersome mentees, others curious observers. One by one, they joined in. Seed tags were passed around small paper slips tied to biodegradable string. Students wrote wishes, affirmations, names of women they'd admired, then tied them to tiny stakes that would dissolve into the soil. Evelyn watched it all without trying to control it. For once, she let it unfold without shaping it to fit her. When the small mic was handed to her, she didn't step up on the platform they'd built. She stayed right there, among them, holding the microphone like a whisper. I've been called many things in my life, she said, voice clear. But I think the hardest one to shake was liability. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few students nodded. Kayla, beside Danielle, stood a little taller. We've been called burdens, mistakes, guilt bills. She paused. But I'm here to tell you, we were never the debt. We were the investment. Silence. Then applause, soft, reverent. Not a cheer. Something closer to prayer. Evelyn passed the mic to a student organizer and walked back to her patch of earth. Jasmine was already there, waiting. The first rose bush stood ready. Deep red, fierce, not decorative. Evelyn knelt slowly, knees cracking, and uncapped the watering can. She tipped it gently. Water pooled, then disappeared into the roots. The scent of soil rose up around her like a memory. One of the mentees, Shari, from Detroit, quiet and wide-eyed, stepped forward. She didn't speak, just knelt beside Evelyn and hugged her. No fanfare, just contact. Others followed. Hugs. A hand squeezed. Eyes met. Not gratitude. Recognition. By late afternoon, the first row was in the ground. The garden was still bare in places, rough around the edges, but it had shape now. Intent. Voice. Evelyn stood at the edge and looked back. Dozens of students, all ages and backgrounds, some with sleeves, rolled, some still holding shovels, others just standing still, watching something that hadn't existed an hour ago. A space made for them. By one of them. A new sign appeared overnight, painted in bold strokes, nailed to the garden gate. Dedication, Saturday morning. All are welcome. Underlined in red. She wasn't just being seen. She was being honored. The red scarf lay draped over her shoulder silk, soft, unapologetically bright against Evelyn's charcoal coat. The wind teased its corners as she stepped onto the path, freshly raked and lined with the small flags of last week's seed tags. The garden was fuller now. The roses had taken. The saplings, while bare, stood taller than memory, and the benches unfinished oak-held students, staff, and strangers leaning forward like witnesses. At the front stood a small podium. Beside it, Jasmine. She cleared her throat, paper trembling slightly in her hand. "This is a letter," she said. "But it's also a map." She looked at Evelyn. "Because before you, I didn't know where I was going. Now I do." She spoke for 3 minutes. About soil, about truth, about silence broken without noise. Her voice caught once, then rose stronger. Danielle was next. She didn't bring notes. "I used to think my mother's power was in how little she needed," she said, voice cracking. "But it wasn't that. It was in how much she gave and how long she waited for someone to notice." Tears didn't embarrass her. She let them fall. Kayla stepped forward after her. No prepared remarks. Just a breath. And then, "She taught me how to look again," she said, scanning the garden. "At the ground. At the roots. At her." A pause. "I almost missed her. And I'm so damn lucky I didn't." Then it was Evelyn's turn. She took the mic with a hand that didn't shake. She didn't look at her notice. He hadn't written any. "I've had many names in my life," she said. "Mother, widow, accountant, donor, burden." A murmur passed through the garden. Familiar words carried weight here. "But today, I don't want a new name. I want a continuation." She stepped back and swept her arm toward the garden. "This is not an end. This is a root system. We are not finished yet." The wind caught the last words and carried them gently across the garden. Jasmine clapped first, then Danielle, then everyone. The final unveiling came quietly. A velvet cloth drawn away. A bronze plaque mounted on stone, etched deep and dignified. The Evelyn Grant Legacy Garden. For those who gave quietly and grew everything. Evelyn stepped forward, fingertips brushing the engraved letters. A pause, then a nod. That was when the dean approached Gray's suit. Kind eyes, program folded under one arm. "Miss Kessler," he said gently, "we were wondering." He offered a folder. Inside, a proposal. "Would you help us build a mentorship curriculum?" She gave quietly. The world answered loudly. The first box arrived Tuesday morning. Evelyn opened it with the casual curiosity of someone expecting university paperwork. Instead, she pulled out a stack of envelopes each, one handwritten, each bearing stamps from different cities. Inside, letters. Dozens. Then hundreds. Girls from Iowa, New York, Georgia, Montana. Some in cursive, others in pencil. Some messy, some pristine. All saying the same thing. "I read about you. You reminded me of my grandma. I didn't think people like us mattered until I saw your garden." Some included photos first-generation college students smiling in borrowed caps. One girl sent a drawing of a rose with roots shaped like open hands. By the end of the week, the count was over 300. Jasmine stopped by that afternoon, breathless with excitement, arms full of manila envelopes. "You're going to need another bookshelf," she teased. Evelyn chuckled softly. "I don't think any shelf could hold this." Jasmine hugged her, not the quick kind, but one that lasted. One that said, You did this. Later that night, Kayla arrived with a pan of lemon bars, carefully foil-wrapped. She placed them on the counter and removed the top layer with a grin. Each bar had a single letter spelled in icing. Together they read, "Thank you, Nana." Danielle came in last, holding a thick leather-bound scrapbook. "Volume 1, she said, setting it gently on the coffee table. Inside were laminated news articles, screenshots, quotes from student essays, and photographs clipped from campus magazines. At the center, a photo of Evelyn, scarf blowing, watering the first rose bush. That week, the university announced a new initiative, the Evelyn Grant Fund for Legacy Leadership. Full-ride scholarships, annual mentorship opportunities, a staff position named in her honor to oversee it all. Evelyn read the announcement aloud once, then folded the paper and didn't say a word. She just sat still for a long time, not processing, just feeling. The next morning, she walked to the garden before sunrise. It was empty, the air cool, the earth still damp from last night's rain. She stood before the Wennant plaque, her breath fogging. At its base, nestled against the stone, lay a single fresh rose. No card, no note, just the flower. She bent to pick it up, fingers slow, reverent. She didn't know who had left it, but she knew what it meant. Behind her, footsteps approached. Kayla. She stopped beside her mother, looked down at the rose, then at the garden that now felt like its own breathing thing. "You didn't just raise me," she said softly. "You raised the bar." Evelyn said nothing. She didn't have to. Back home, a package waited on the porch. Thick, cream-colored, hand-delivered. Inside, a folder, gold-trimmed, marked with the seal of the National Education Leadership Summit. Her name was printed across the invitation's cover in elegant script. Keynote speaker, Evelyn G. Kessler. She opened the envelope. A single line sat centered on the first page. "Will you lead the conversation?" She was done being introduced. She was doing the introducing. The lights weren't as harsh as she expected. Evelyn stepped into them calmly, her red scarf knotted neatly at her throat, her shoes quiet against the stage floor. She didn't fidget. She didn't clear her throat. She stood with the poise of someone who knew the weight of her name because she'd carried it long enough to know how to use it. The auditorium was packed. Donors, educators, students, government officials in dark suits, young women in borrowed heels. She didn't begin with a story. She began with Jasmine. "I've had the privilege of mentoring dozens of brilliant young minds," Evelyn said, voice steady. "But today, I want to give the first word to one of them." From the wings, Jasmine emerged, confident, no notes, just presence. "Legacy," she said, "is not what you put on buildings. It's what you leave in people, in conversations, in mirrors, in choices." She paused, eyes sweeping the room. "Evelyn Grant didn't just guide mesh, reminded me that I was never lost, just quiet." Applause rippled across the room. Jasmine nodded once and stepped aside. Evelyn returned to the mic. She took a breath. Then, "I've been called many things in my life," she said. "Guilt bill, burden, a line item on someone else's ledger." She let the silence sit. "But let me be clear." Her voice didn't shake. "I was never your guilt bill. I was your invoice." A stunned pause, then the room erupted. Not polite claps, not performative applause. Thunder. Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't grin. She just smiled. The kind of smile that had weathered years, folded laundry, paid tuition, and swallowed whole rooms of silence. She nodded once to Jasmine, then to the audience, and walked off stage. Back in the green room, a conference assistant handed her a coat. "You were incredible, Miss Kessler." She thanked him, quietly. As she slipped on the coat, something crinkled in the pocket. A letter? Handwritten, folded twice. The envelope was wrinkled, the ink slightly smudged. On the back, scrawled in teenage penmanship, "From a girl in Chicago." Evelyn stared at it, and slowly, with care, began to unfold the future one line at a time. She didn't chase legacy. She became it. The kitchen was quiet, except for the faint hum of the kettle and the sound of paper being unfolded, careful and slow. Evelyn sat at the table, her red scarf draped on the back of her chair, glasses perched on her nose. She held the letter like something sacred, not fragile, but full, the kind of full that takes its time. Dear Miss Kessler, it began in looping, hopeful handwriting. My name is Araceli. I'm 16. I saw your speech. I didn't know women like you existed. The letter went on. Not polished, not rehearsed, just raw admiration and the soft ache of recognition. Sometimes I think I'm too loud, or too serious, or not enough, but then I saw how you stand, and I thought, maybe I'm not too much. Maybe I'm just beginning. Evelyn read it twice, then folded it gently, smoothed its edges, and tucked it into the notebook where she kept quotes from students, reminders of names she never wanted to forget. Kayla arrived just before noon, holding a small velvet box. No speeches, she warned, setting it down beside the tea. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Promises, promises. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, a single charm at the center, a tiny compass star etched faintly with the letter E. For when you forget who showed us the way, Kayla said, then added, more quietly, you've always been my North Star. Danielle walked in behind her, holding 2 teacups. No words, just warmth. The 3 women sat, the kind of silence between them that required no filling, just presence. Outside, golden dusk draped itself across the garden. Mentees arrived in cluster slaughter, bouncing off the stone path, paper cups of cider in hand. Jasmine led them with quiet joy, camera slung around her neck. Group photo, she called, grinning. Evelyn stepped outside. They posed at the garden's center, in front of the plaque that no longer made her uneasy. She stood in the middle, not because they asked her to, but because they left space. The shutter clicked 3 times. Then Jasmine whispered to her, You didn't build this for us. You built it with us. That night, Evelyn opened her journal. The page was clean. She wrote slowly, deliberately. I remembered who I was, and when I did everything changed. She underlined it. Twice. Then she set the pen down, pushed her chair back, and walked out to the garden one last time. The roses were in full bloom, now bold, defiant, unapologetic. She stood before the plaque. The wind picked up just enough to stir the leaves, flutter the seed flags, and kiss the engraved letters with a whisper. The Evelyn Grant Legacy Garden. For those who gave quietly and grew everything. She closed her eyes. Not from fatigue. From fullness. She was never the guilt bill. She was always the blueprint.